Hey, Kings Hill family. Yes, I have a coffee cup today, but just so you know, I'm not trying to be your corny Christian guy with the coffee cup. It actually has a point that I'll get to in a second. I really wanted to encourage you today with what the Lord's been teaching me in my time in the Word. And as you may remember, a couple weeks ago, I shared some verses from the book of Jeremiah in relation to God's judgment and punishment that he was prophesying through Jeremiah to the people of Israel. And I got to Jeremiah 17 today, and it's a really interesting chapter. I encourage you, if you have some time on your own, read through it. But what struck me was I've been reading through chapters 1 through 16, and God's judgment is coming. God's judgment is coming. God's judgment is coming. And finally, we get to chapter 17, and God says he will relent if the Israelites will do one thing. So you've had 16 chapters of judgment, and finally God says, I will relent if you'll do just one thing. So I'm leaning in. What is it? What is this one thing? And it's to keep the Sabbath. Keep the Sabbath. This is what he says. Keep the Sabbath, and I will put kings on the throne of David forever. I will bless you and the rulers of Israel for your generation, and then the next one, and the next one, and the next one. All you have to do is keep the Sabbath. And if you're not a Hebrew, which I'm assuming you're not, I'm not, that might come as a pretty big shock. The Sabbath, keep the Sabbath, that's all they had to do. And I was struck by this. And this for me, makes me realize that I probably don't understand the Sabbath in the fullest sense of the word. And so I've been doing a little bit of research, and the Hebrew word is Shabbat, and it means stop. Think about that. Stop. You know, when Moses gave the command to keep the Sabbath holy, he referenced how God rested on the seventh day of creation. And both you and I know that God doesn't need to take a break or rest from anything because he's God, and yet he intentionally stops and takes in his good work for a whole day, accomplishing nothing for a whole day. That might sound American to you, or if you come from a different culture where work productivity is valued, that might sound crazy. But COVID is happening, and now the days blur together, and now more than ever, you probably have the capacity to set aside time. The Hebrews would cook every meal they would need on the Sabbath. They would cook it the day before so that they didn't even have to prepare food on the Sabbath. Now, obviously, when we get to the New Testament, there's been so many traditions and rituals attached to the Sabbath, and Jesus even heals on the Sabbath, and people get upset because he's healing. So clearly, we're not supposed to be slaves to tradition and ritual. But Jesus says the Sabbath was given for man. The Sabbath was given for man. And so what I realize is that the reason God's going to relent of his judgment if they start the Sabbath is because the Sabbath is a way of life. It's a way to remember who's in control and who's not. Remember who is God and who's not. Because when we stop on a Sabbath, when you and I stop, it's an acknowledgement of God and him being in control. Because guess what? Just because we stop working, God still keeps working. The universe will continue to spin. When we Shabbat, when we stop, the universe keeps going. So the coffee mug is how I remember to stop. I have a daily Shabbat, if you will, because in the morning I get this out, I drink it, I read my Bible, and it's my daily stopping, my daily pausing, my daily reminder that God is in control and he's running the world and I am not. I think the temptation, especially in our cultural context of Boston, is to achieve and have work output. And those things are great, but God is not impressed. He will prove that he is in control and he is supreme. And so my encouragement for us is to practice stopping. Take time every day and then take a whole day. Work your schedule. Organize your online class duties or if you're working from home, organize your work schedule so that you can have a full day to stop. Shabbat. Remember who's in control. Remember your place in the world. And remember the goodness of God. The Israelites got to this point of judgment because they had forgotten. And the Sabbath is just one weekly reminder. Come back to the Lord. Remember him. So the Sabbath lifestyle is just that. It's taking time to stop and remember God. Throughout the day, throughout your regular rhythms, stop and remember God.